What started as a playful curiosity soon became a thrilling challenge, a journey into the bustling London underground with one daring goal: to be seen, even if only in a fleeting, unintended glimpse. This story captures the excitement, suspense, and unexpected reactions of that bold day, where each crowded station and sideways glance added to the allure. It was an experience I hadn't anticipated, and I'm not sure if I'll try it again, but then, who knows? Recently, I found myself intrigued by the thought of being a bit more daring in public spaces. Conversations with my friends, along with stories that included hints of public spontaneity and subtle exhibitionism, stirred something in me, making me wonder if I might take things a step further in real life. I remembered an old boyfriend who used to get excited by those fleeting, unintended glimpses, a quick glance up a skirt or a peek down a blouse. Sometimes, he'd try to coax me into leaving an extra button undone, or to sit with my legs a bit less carefully crossed. Though I'd usually laugh it off, I occasionally found myself wondering what it would feel like if a stranger happened to notice. Lately, that curiosity has only grown, and I decided that maybe one day I'd give it a try just to see how it felt. In fact, I'd thought about going without any extra layers underneath, creating the possibility of an unexpected glimpse. Living in a city as big as London has its perks. There are plenty of spaces and crowds where one can blend in, surrounded by strangers. I considered a few locations: a stroll through a busy park or even a well-frequented department store, where a casual lean or reach could offer a fleeting hint. But in the end, I thought that public transport, with its bustling energy and packed spaces, would be perfect. Planning my outfit turned out to be more complex than I'd expected. I didn't want to stand out too obviously, but I wanted something that would allow for subtle adjustments, where everything could look entirely accidental. Eventually, I chose a loose, white blouse with buttons down the front, letting me adjust it to show as much or as little as I felt comfortable with. I paired it with a short, wraparound skirt that hung just above the knee, rising slightly when I sat, and I practiced a few movements in front of my mirror, crossing and uncrossing my legs, noting how the fabric shifted. As I prepared, I felt a rush of nervous excitement, wondering what it would feel like in the real world, among strangers who might catch a glimpse without realizing it. I also experimented with the blouse, noticing how demure it looked with all the buttons done up, though just a couple undone created a hint of openness. The anticipation made my heart race, leaving me both exhilarated and slightly out of breath. If I undid just a couple of buttons, my blouse would fall open just enough to reveal a hint of skin, the fabric parting naturally. Leaning forward only added to the effect, the blouse shifting ever so slightly to create an inviting but subtle glimpse. Without anything beneath, I felt a mix of thrill and anticipation, imagining what someone might see if they happened to glance at just the right moment. The idea left me feeling a tingling excitement. The hardest part was waiting for a sunny day that would draw people outside, blending my outfit with the crowds of casually dressed tourists in central London. July had been frustratingly cool and gray, so I waited patiently until the first warm days of August finally arrived. On a bright Monday morning, I took a quick shower, feeling the summer air on my skin as I slipped into my blouse and skirt. Going without anything underneath added a new layer of excitement, especially on such a warm day. I let a couple of buttons fall open, just enough to get comfortable. I'd adjust more once I got on the tube. I decided to try the Central Line, which was perfect for where I lived and had that perfect mix of city workers and tourists moving between the city and Oxford Street. With the regular crowds, I could easily blend in, feeling both hidden and daring at once. Boarding an eastbound train at Holborn, I squeezed into the crowded space, feeling the press of people around me. Holding onto the support rail, I noticed the mix of faces, some travelers clutching their maps, others clearly on their way to work with briefcases and handbags in hand. The thrill of anonymity in a sea of strangers only heightened the rush, knowing that if someone looked closely, they might catch a fleeting, unintended glimpse. I felt a quiet thrill, wondering if anyone had noticed the subtle openness of my blouse. I kept glancing down, catching little glimpses and wondering if someone nearby might see the same view. But everyone seemed wrapped up in their own worlds, barely looking. Maybe I'd imagined this would be easier. Perhaps a part of me wanted to know someone had been curious, that there was at least a hint of attention. It was hard to gauge in the crowded train, especially with people constantly moving in and out at each stop. When we arrived at Liverpool Street, I decided to get off and take a return train, hoping for a new crowd and fresh possibilities. As more people squeezed on, I found myself pressed against a man in a suit, his presence flattening my blouse, the moment both awkward and amusing. A few stops later, the crowd thinned slightly, and I readjusted, letting my blouse fall naturally open again. Back at Holborn, just as I was about to exit, I caught the eye of a man passing by. The brief look he gave, followed by a quick glance over his shoulder as the doors closed, hinted that he'd noticed something and maybe wished he'd stayed on just a bit longer. The tube car was stiflingly warm, and I could feel a slight sheen of perspiration forming along my face and neck, the heat settling into my skin. Suddenly, I found myself pressed close to a sharply dressed woman, perhaps in her 30s, her dark suit and crisp blouse giving her an air of elegance. I offered a small, apologetic smile and turned my gaze to the map above, but I could feel her presence, her gaze lingering for a split second. She looked away, then glanced back, shifting slightly as if adjusting her stance, and I felt a subtle thrill knowing she'd looked again. The train jolted, and as more people joined, I found myself pressed closer to her, the space between us nearly non-existent. Her gaze flickered downward once more, and I couldn't help but wonder what she was thinking. My own imagination started to fill in the blanks, my mind racing, but just as I felt caught up in the moment, the train pulled into Notting Hill Gate. She stepped back to exit, her gaze fixed ahead as the crowd carried her off. I watched her disappear onto the platform, feeling a strange exhilaration at the brief, silent interaction. The carriage grew quieter, and I decided to get off at Holland Park, ready to switch platforms and head back towards central London. As I stood on the platform, I adjusted my blouse just enough so that it felt casually open, embracing the warm, lively air around me. When the next train arrived, it was quieter than the last, so I slipped into a seat, scanning the carriage for a place that felt just right. I settled opposite a young couple who seemed like they might appreciate a moment of casual interaction, but they left at the very next stop. In their place sat a tired-looking woman with 2 children, not quite the audience I had imagined for my little experiment in self-confidence. I relaxed back into my seat, allowing myself to get comfortable, the slight parting of my legs making me feel the air around me, a subtle reminder of the day's warmth. My gaze drifted to the adverts overhead, thoughts mingling with the steady rhythm of the train. When we reached Marble Arch, the woman and her kids left, replaced by 3 young people, 2 girls and a guy, who sat across from me. The girls were soon absorbed in their guidebook, clearly tourists, while the guy looked around absently, drumming his fingers on his knee, clearly a little bored with the ride. I crossed my legs slowly, letting the fabric of my skirt slide just a little, exposing the bare curve of my thigh. Taking out a book to appear absorbed, I cast a quick glance at my reflection, noting the way my skirt had shifted to reveal a hint of skin. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the guy glance over, his gaze lingering a bit longer than he probably intended. Emboldened, I shifted slightly, enjoying the quiet thrill of being noticed, aware of the air on my skin and the gentle, unspoken connection in the charged stillness of the carriage. The girls started looking at a guidebook, obviously tourists, and the guy looked around in a bored kind of way, drumming his fingers on his knee. I crossed my legs, letting the side of the skirt slide open, showing off my bare thigh right up to my hips. I got my book out of my bag and buried my head in it, but by glancing at my reflection in the window opposite, I could see just how much flesh I was showing. I peeped at the guy sitting opposite me, and he clearly couldn't take his eyes off my thigh. I shifted my crossed leg further, seeing if I could flash even more. My smooth bare thigh felt cool and exposed. Time for stage 2. I nonchalantly uncrossed my legs and let them rest slightly apart, with my skirt riding quite high up my legs. From practicing in my room, I knew that anyone looking up between my legs would be able to see quite far up my skirt, but that the ultimate prize would still be hidden, for the moment. I so carelessly spread my legs a little further, my skirt slipping a little higher. Now I knew that the view would be clear right up to my flesh. I managed to sneak a glance at the guy opposite. He was trying to look casual, but his eyes kept flicking back to my open legs and what he could see between them. There was a gleam of sweat on his brow. In his place, I'd have been hoping beyond hope that this amazing chick opposite wouldn't close her legs or get off at the next stop. My heart was beating really hard. This was so exciting, so naughty. Surely, he could tell how I was feeling. The girls were still chatting about where to go next. Luckily, they hadn't noticed what I was up to, or I'd have been in trouble. The guy had his hands casually resting on his crotch, trying to hide the fact that he had developed a huge hard-on. I could feel the warmth pooling within me, a lingering thrill that refused to fade. Looking down below my book, I could see down my cleavage. I coughed into my hand, making my breasts bounce gently. I actually didn't feel I could go on much longer without feeling myself. I noticed the guy opposite shift in his seat, his hand pressing against his tool. I want to feel him. I had to struggle not to look at his face, but I couldn't afford to catch his eye. If I did, I knew my face would give me away, show him that I was exposing myself deliberately. I could feel myself flushing. Oh hell, I would have to get off. My suppressed excitement must be clearly visible by now. Just in time, the tube pulled into the next station. Making to get up, I closed my legs, pressing my thighs together hard, feeling a subtle warmth settle between my thighs. Oh Lord! I pushed past the people standing by the door, someone's arm rubbing over my body, and almost fell out onto the platform. I sat down on one of the station benches, breathing hard. Oh my God! Oh my God! I could already hear the rumble of the next tube train coming, feel the warm rush of air push down the tunnel. I squeezed my muscles one more time, feeling the last little tingling. I felt flushed, red in the face. I wiped my face with my arm, feeling the sheen of perspiration on my face and neck and the top of my breasts. Time to go. As the next train came in and discharged its load of commuters and tourists, I got up and mingled with them. In a while it would be time to head for home, but first I needed a drink. I sat in the first pub I could find and took a most unladylike gulp of a large red wine, trying to analyze how I had felt flashing on the tube. I'd expected to feel excited and slightly aroused, but I hadn't anticipated how much so. I could see that the seat of my skirt was wet. Hopefully the warm weather would dry that off before I set off for home. As soon as I got home, I started writing this, before I forgot the details. It was weird, but getting so excited scared me a bit, so I haven't dared to try it again since. But if I do, I'll let you know. And so, that was my day, one I'll never forget. Will I try it again? Maybe, but only time will tell.